Hi everyone, my name is Eric Doyle and welcome to an OGV Energy Live special. OGV Energy magazine's theme for this month is Subsea, and next week sees the return of Subsea Expo. So we thought it'd be really good to catch up with the people at the helm and shine a bit of a light on the good folks at Global Underwater Hub. We're going to be back on the 29th of this month for our full live show, but for now we're going to have a short show and we're going to really focus on Global Underwater Hub and what's happening at Subsea Expo next week. Remember, this is an interactive show and you have a chance to put questions and comments to our guests. Please say hello. Let us know where you are, what you do for a living, which company you work with. Tell us where you are in the world and let us know a bit about your interest in Subsea. And if you're heading to the Expo next week, we'd love to hear from you. Without further ado, let's meet our guests from Global Underwater Hub today. Please welcome Chief Executive Neil Gordon. I'll bring Neil on first. Hi, Neil. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. And you?
Oh, very well indeed, thank you. And we've also got your lovely colleague, Steve Fernie, Strategic Program Manager at Global Underwater Hub. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I'm good, thanks very much, Eric. Yep.
Yeah, it's great to have you both here. Neil, I thought we would start off. We've had you on the show a few times. February is a really important month for the subsea industry, you know, with the Expo and all of that. And we've had you on 2 or 3 times on the show, round about the same kind of time of the month. I thought it'd be good to start with a wee reminder for those who maybe don't know so much about what's happening here, or maybe just transition to another part from another part of the industry, what Global Underwater Hub's role is, and specifically your role and purpose in the industry, just as a wee reminder.
Okay, thanks. So Global Underwater Hub, or GUH, is the acronym which we use all the time. We're a trade and industry development body. We're owned by industry and governed by industry, and we have over 300 members. We transitioned ourselves a couple of years back. Formerly, we were known as Subsea UK, which is the trade body for the subsea industry. But we went through that transition a couple of years ago. And with a bit of support from government, and realizing that the huge potential that existed and for the future in underwater, in the underwater space, we work across a whole multitude of sectors. So we've got oil and gas, traditional markets, offshore renewables, including offshore wind, wave and tidal, defense, aquaculture, seabed minerals, and marine science. So what our job really is there is to help be the voice of industry, but also help industry navigate, what the challenges are ahead, be that voice, but also understand where the markets are going as well, and help through things like events, workshops, papers, etc., up and down the country. So that's our primary purpose, but owned and governed by industry, and we're a not-for-profit organisation.
Very good. I absolutely love that. Just a note to our viewers or listeners today, just do exactly what Akhilmon has done. Akhilmon Matthew, he said, hi, I'm Akhil. I am from Germany. How are you guys? We are fine, and we are all the better for having you join us. So drop us a note. Let us know where you are in the world. Let us know what you do, and let us know what your interest is in Subsea. And Stephen, Neil just gave us a really good rundown on what GUH's role and purpose is in industry. How do you fit into all this? Your title is Strategic Program Manager, but what does that actually mean?
Main part of that comes down to market intelligence, looking to understand all these various markets, as Neil's mentioned, that we have an interest in, looking to understand the direction of travel for a lot of them. We have a lot of our members, a lot of the supply chain are active in a lot of different markets. Some of them are looking to move, understand where their product or their service is transferable to. So a lot of my role is to try and interpret that and see where the demand is, whether that's in multiple markets or different countries and different geographies. We provide that to our members so they can kind of see that at a top level. And it's also to guide some of the particular focuses that GUH has through this year and future years in terms of particular areas where we think we should focus on. So yeah, when you're global and when you're everything underwater, it's quite a lot of markets to look into, and it's very dynamic, I think, is the best way of putting it. But essentially, it's trying to get a steer on what is the direction of travel in all these markets.
Very good, and thanks for that. Yeah, it sounds as if you don't have any days when you're not that busy, do you?
Not that many, no.
Not that many. Thanks for that, Stephen. We'll come back to you throughout this show. Neil, I thought it'd be nice. We've actually done this every year that we've met on this show. have a little time to reflect on what's happened since Subsea Expo 2023. The last time we met, we were speaking about coming out of, getting back on our feet after lockdown. Back in those days, we were talking about COP26. Now we've had COP28. We've got Ukraine. We've got unrest in the Middle East. And if today's front pages are anything to go by, a pretty uncertain question mark future ahead politically here at home. How has the year been for you since Subsea Expo last year?
Good question. I think I've reported recently that it's been a difficult year for industry to understand what's happening because it's been so dynamic. There's so many different things going on in and around the world. You mentioned there Ukraine, we've got the Middle East situation, we've got political, let's say, changes looming perhaps and not too far ahead. But last year, it was very difficult. Thinking of coming out of a lockdown we talked about before, and we thought we'd manage to see clearly ahead, but it's not that clear. The future is quite dynamic. As I say, there's things changing all the time. Geopolitical situations in this country and around the world is having an effect, energy shortages, etc., policy changes. So I think for industry and for ourselves, we're situated probably in a good place to try and put some color on that and try and fight through that noise and work out what does that actually mean for industry. If we talk to the different stakeholders and our members, this last year's, well, what's happening next? Today we're all busy. We're all very busy at the moment. But what's tomorrow bring? What's beyond that? And I think that's the real challenge that we're seeing at the minute. It's not really clear what the long-term prognosis is of the industry and where it's going.
And Stephen, that year on reflection, what are you seeing in terms of impacts on and energy in the markets in your analysis? How are you seeing it reflected the last year's activity?
I think when you look at all these markets, there's actually it looks positive at a demand level. I think you've got an increase in oil and gas, and that's energy security. I think you've got an increase in offshore wind and renewables, and that's energy transition. And then going wider than that, you've got an increase in looking to be more of an interconnected world. So even looking at telecoms cables, there's an increase in that area. So if you look purely at demand, it all looks like it's pointing in the right direction. I think from our point of view, it's not quite as straightforward as a lot of demand is good news for the supply chain. There's a few issues there in terms of project certainty and timelines, and a few little road bumps there, which need to be kind of taken into consideration as well. There's what's probable, and then there's what's actually possible in terms of what can be delivered.
Very good. Thanks for that. Just going to quickly say hi to some of our viewers that have come in. Neil Jordan from ICR Integrity has joined the show to see how Subsea or linked to and the Expo might be of interest to himself and ICR. So I'm sure that these guys are hoping that you're going to head along to the Expo and find out the answers to those questions and maybe get some here, Neil. So thanks for that. Brilliant. Excellent. In terms of the last time we spoke, you were talking about a year of transition, Neil. But the focus is now very much on delivery for you guys. Is that right?
That's right. As an organization, we built, the GOH organization, up and down the country. We've got our main office here, which is based in West Hill in Aberdeen, but we've also got a new base opened up in Newcastle, and that's fully operational. And we've got a base which just opened at the beginning of the year in Bristol. So that gives us 3 hubs, and in those hubs we've got great facilities for conferences, workshops, TV connections, etc. So building that and putting the transition in place, and as Steve's mentioned there, it's about bringing all that knowledge and that market intelligence. How do we start disseminating that and engaging with all the stakeholders? We get lots of visits from let's say international delegations to try and find out what the capability is here, but it's also a good opportunity for us to project that not only to stakeholders across the UK, but across the world as well. So the delivery part is very much about creating, opportunity for companies to employ some more jobs, develop their technologies in the right areas where they can actually find a route to market, something that's really important, and also export opportunities around the world as well. So we've had some real focus on the international market, although we might think that the UK oil and gas market is very fragile. When we talk to the actual a lot of our members, they're exporting a huge amount around the world, and that's a very important part. We've got very much that global market, so we'll have to keep our finger on the pulse right across there. But we've grown quite a lot as an organisation. We're up to nearly, 22, 23 full-time staff and still growing. And that gives us more capability to engage regionally across the UK. So we've got regional management teams in the Bristol area. In Bristol, you might think, why Bristol? Well, Bristol's very well situated on the south. It can connect into London. It's not too far from that side. And if you go into the middle of London, it's sometimes a bit too big and you get lost in that space. But Bristol's well situated for what we're seeing happen down in the Celtic Sea area. There's some big developments happening in offshore wind, floating offshore wind there. Plus, it's very well positioned for the defence sector, which is becoming a growing concern, let's say, in underwater subsea infrastructure security. And on the south coast, across Plymouth, Portsmouth, Southampton area, there's a real strength in marine science and robotics in that space as well. So that's why Bristol, and of course northeast England around Newcastle, there's a real strength of cluster on the east coast there as well. So that connects us up and down the country. So that from an infrastructure part, it's really joined us up, and that being able to join up and share that information and have a more powerful voice to influence stakeholders, including government, because government want to know what they can do to try and help the industry to grow and make those, I suppose, transition as they talk about, and win some of those projects both here and around the world.
Very good. And Stephen, this focus on delivery, this focus on getting things moving, how are you seeing that reflected amongst your members? What sort of feedback are you getting? And is that something that you actively go out and seek?
It is actually, yeah. We carry out a business survey. We did this last year. What we're looking to really understand quite a few things. We got a lot of great information back in terms of how our members and the wider supply chain view their capability and their capacity to look at all these markets that they're interested in. And actually, all the interest in the markets was very interesting. We asked about diversification. We said, how active are you in diversification? Are you currently diversified, or is it something you're actively considering? The vast majority of organizations are active in multiple markets. They've looked to understand where their product or their skill, their service can be applied into other areas. And most of the time they're doing that in the most efficient way, where it's not a huge change to their product or service. It's not a huge initial investment that's required. They're very much seeing that there's a transferability in what they do in one market that can be applied elsewhere as well. So that's positive. That's very positive. We know we have a world-class supply chain here, and that's been proven by where we are active around the rest of the world as well. So as well as being geographically diverse, it's also looking to be in multiple markets as well. So there's a real appetite to be involved in these markets. Yep. One of the issues, and I mentioned it earlier, is just understanding what those timescales look like and being in the right place to be ready for those opportunities. There's a little bit of not too sure whether some of the timescales that are being talked about are concrete. And when you don't have that certainty, it's difficult to fully be ready for it.
Exactly. I'm thinking either Neil is waiting in some sort of lobby and this show hasn't started yet, and that's what he's commenting on, or he's kind of alluding to is it just me, or are we still waiting for things to really kick off and start? Do you get that sense from your membership community that there's this urge to get going and get after it, but there seems to be delays and timelines moving out and calendars shifting to the right?
That's a great point. If you look at it from that perspective, there's a lot of big projects being banded around by governments and targets and government targets here and around the world. But as Steve just mentioned there, when are we actually going to see these? When are we going to be committed to these? And when can we actually get our teeth into these? The word that comes up, we talk a lot historically about visibility of projects. Yeah, we've got visibility, but we need surety. Surety is more appropriate. When are we going to see these things actually come into play? Because industry's poised, it's perfectly poised, and certainly the underwater industry is very capable when we think about offshore wind, particularly floating offshore wind, where we see, in cables and mooring systems, etc. That's the big areas where we see a huge opportunity. But how quickly can those projects move? And a lot of those projects are taking time to move because of the process it goes through, approvals and planning, etc., and getting to FID finally, so they can get these projects over the line. So that goes back to Steve's point earlier on. We see the scale of what's in front, but when is it actually going to come to us? And I think if there's anything we can do is to really try and influence, let's say, the certain stakeholders to try and smooth that out and make it a bit more sure. So it is a challenge, and that's really what we're waiting for things to start. We need to try and make these things happen a lot quicker if possible.
Yeah, quite right, and well put, Neil. I'm hoping that you weren't commenting that you were waiting on the show to start, and I think we got the gist of your question. Yeah, thank you for that, and a great response there as well. The entire energy sector is fascinated with the word transition. Every time we have a guest on this show, I ask them what their take is on the definition of energy transition. What does it actually mean for them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in hard, cold facts? Neil, can I put it to you? What does energy transition mean in hard terms for you and for GUH?
So I talk about this a lot, particularly from a supply chain. But transition, the word transition means move from one state to another. So we're moving from a fossil fuel energy to a more green, renewable type energy. And I think that's when you talk about energy transition. Now, moving from one state to the other doesn't happen in one simple movement or a switch. The transition is the part in the middle. As you perhaps decline oil and gas reliability and increase, let's say, the green energies or renewables. And what the transition part is that gap in the middle. Because if you've got the two parts and there's a gap, if you decline oil and gas too quickly, then you're going to lose the capability and capacity of your supply chain, and you won't be able to deliver where your targets were because you've only got so much capacity, and that will lower as well. So it's that gap in the middle, and that's what, if I'm being quite critical, we're not really focusing on the transition and managing that transition and how we get from one state to the other. There's this, we're going to jump across very quickly, and policies drive this, a lot of agenda and confidence in the market. But unless we've got a real industrial strategy to make that gap, to cross that gap and what that transition looks like. So that's what I call the gap, is the moving from one state to the other. And that's the transition part. It's not a switch. It needs a real strategy in there.
Very good. And Stephen, are you seeing that when you're engaging through your surveys and just direct communication with that that ability and desire to diversify, to jump in from your membership community? Is that something that you see is prevalent today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of build on what Neil said, it's about an actual transition and a gradual move, and it's about taking everyone with you. So if I go back to what we found in our survey, there's a desire to be diversified and to be in multiple markets. Mm-hmm. We asked three main points we wanted to find out. Does the supply chain have the capability? And the answers were unequivocally yes. The supply chain backs itself. It has the skills to be involved in all these markets. Does it have the necessary capacity? And the question that kind of was a little bit more of a cautiously optimistic answer that didn't quite felt they have the capacity at the moment. So if you look at the opportunity at the moment, there's a little bit of a supply and undersupply in terms of what's required. If you don't transition properly and there's a bit of a gap there, you might lose some of the supply chain. So actually you've got even less than what you need by the time that these demand and these new markets really take off. So if you don't transition, I guess, at the right pace, and you try and move too quickly from one to the other, you actually risk having an even further undersupply, and that's going to seriously affect your ability to meet these goals and aspirations that we have. And that then leads, as Neil said, to the third question we asked, which was about confidence. And again, it leads to things like timescales. If there's a little bit of a question mark over when are these things actually going to happen, that then puts a question mark on whether you're going to invest in that capacity, and then that is then going to have an impact potentially on your capability as well. So they're all interconnected.
Very good indeed. Very good indeed. We have the calendar favourite, the industrial calendar favourite, Subsea Expo next week. I'm sure you've been planning it for a long. How? Just an off-piece question. How early do you start working on planning a Subsea Expo? When does all the planning begin? Is it pretty much finish one and start the next?
Pretty much. I think that's, if you don't start planning as soon as you've got to learn from one year to the next. So you take all that learning, you have a post, wash-up meeting. What can you do better? What can you improve? Taking any feedback. Yes, and it starts working straight away for the next year. And it's an endless project right throughout the year. And it builds up right up to the last minute. That's when it gets really busy through the whole sort of promotion and marketing side of things in the organisation. But it is a year-long thing.
My goodness. And how long's it been going for now?
Oh, I think it's almost 20 years. I think when it first started, way back, 2004, it would have been the first year when Subsea UK was created. But yeah, almost 20 years. Been through a few shapes and forms over its years.
Absolutely terrific. And yeah, I think everyone's looking forward to it. So gets underway next week. You love an inspiring theme. This year's theme, navigating the blue frontier. Love that. Tell us a wee bit about that and the overarching theme and what it's going to mean for the guests, the visitors, the exhibitors, all of that.
Yeah. So when we looked at this year, yeah, it sort of brings together some of the things we've just been talking about. That confusing landscape, what's going on, things are moving a lot. So the blue frontier, meaning the blue economy, means it's changing. It's quite dynamic. And then the navigating part is trying to understand how do you plot your course through the future, because the future looks quite confusing. There's so many different things taking shape. So navigating the blue economy or navigating the blue frontier, looking at some long range stuff, but also looking at what's the current things of topics of today where the opportunities are. So that's really essentially what the message is around. So we've got a whole host of conference sessions running over the 3 days in 3 different theatres. And we have a plenary session, which is looking at some of the kind of out there big projects, which are not necessary here and now today, because often or not, there's a lot of talk about energy transition, net zero, and it's been going on for some time, and that's very important. But we want to try and drill down into some of the detail, and Steve's got a really good session in the afternoon on the first day, which is looking at all the different markets, and he's got a whole team of analysts on different companies coming in to talk about those different sectors. In the plenary session in the morning, I'm going to be looking a bit more at some of the, let's say, the more futuristic technologies and really pushing the boundaries, in that blue frontier as well. So where are we seeing ourselves going in 10 or 20 years' time in some of the technologies, and how are companies today managing to plot their way through that? And there's a couple of big projects we'll be talking about. One called Deep, which is making humans aquatic on the seabed. It's like putting a Mars, you call it station, like a space station on the seabed to carry out research. And then there's the other one about XLCC, which is the cables running from Morocco to the UK, transporting renewable power over 3,800 kilometers of cable, 4 of those, which is massive projects. So it's really interesting to bring some of those technologies that are pushing the boundaries of technology.
Fascinating. Absolutely love it. So Stephen, your session on markets on day one, what's the session called?
It's an unimaginative market demand in the energy transition, but I think it's really wanting to put it together almost as a little bit of scene setter. So a lot of the conference and actually the exhibition itself is really this showcase of what the supply chain is capable of doing, and these really innovative products and services that are available. We just wanted to kind of set the scene and say, look, there are multiple markets here. You'll be involved to a certain extent in one or more of them. What do they look like in isolation? But then also they're kind of parallel to each other as well. So you've got elements of the supply chain that if they go into one market, then they're not available for the other. So we really just wanted to look at oil and gas, offshore wind, marine renewables, carbon capture, utilization and storage, as well as some of those key markets. And then we're also going to look at the vessel market, which is active across all of those. And that is kind of a key indicator of what some of the markets look like as well. So got a great lineup of analytical companies and intelligence agencies that are going to give their view on how they'll see those markets. So yeah, very much looking forward to it.
There you go, folks. You heard it here first. Get yourself along for all the cutting edge of market data analysis right across the sector. Fantastic. What time is that session, Stephen?
That is on Tuesday at 2:00 in the Orange conference room.
In the Orange conference room. So people are taking notes already, and they'll be queued out the door. It'll be queued out the door. Fantastic. One thing that caught my eye, for no other reason than the fact that I'm fascinated by this, and I think we've really moved on as an industry on this, is the session at 10 to midday, chaired by Callum Falconer on day 2, the decommissioning and circular economy piece. I think when I first got into this business, the whole idea of circular economy, I think we were kind of playing with it a little bit. It was kind of dinky, and maybe we could take a bit of steel and we could maybe repurpose it and all of that. But I'm fascinated by the focus, the ingenuity, and just the sort of entrepreneurial spirit of what the circular economy is really meaning for this industry. I think it's fantastic. Any comments on that?
Comment a little bit. I think we're seeing much more just in some of the engagement we've had through, we work quite closely with the NSTA, North Sea Transition Authority, and we've run a number of workshops with operators and with the tier ones, looking at the challenge of getting new equipment, because there's quite a long waiting period for some new equipment, but there's also this, how do you take some of that existing equipment that's been perhaps recovered, but that could be repurposed and re-engineered and recertified and reused. So I think that's an important part, rather than sending it to the scrap heap and melting it down into that whole circular part, is you can actually repurpose some equipment a lot earlier. And again, there's some other areas in there as well, things like where you had combinations of metals and plastics. There's a company down in Newcastle that we featured a while ago. How do you recycle umbilicals again and put them back into the supply chain, because all that materials can be and will be and should be repurposed or recycled in other uses. And we're seeing things like concrete mattresses that are used on the seabed for protection, these being recovered and used in, let's say, for coastal protection or for building up in places. And again, there's some really clever things if we start looking at that whole circular economy for repurposing and reuse of some of the equipment that we recover.
Yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you've got your exhibitors, what, 170 odd? What's your exhibitor count this year?
It's about 170, I think it is at the last count, thereabouts, which is pretty much.
Yep, carry on.
Yeah, about 170. And we've got we've also got a small zone which has got some developers on it. So we've got some of our offshore wind developers there talking about what they're doing. So there's always a demand from visitors to say, well, we want to go and speak to some of the companies who have got these projects coming. So we've actually got this small developer zone where we've got a few companies there. So likes of Ørsted, Flotation, who are they specialize in the floating wind, and Serco is another one who are working quite closely with us as well. So good for companies to come along and engage with them. And there's a whole host of other companies going to be exhibiting, and there's various other activities going on as well. And on the last day, we have the Foresee Your Future, where we bring in the young students. We have a program from them to get them interested in the industry and looking at careers there. Because that's one of the big things we talk about in the future, is how do we ensure that our industry is attractive to invest in, but also attractive for careers. So how do we engage the younger generation? So they'll be on the exhibition floor with some tasks and challenges to get them really engaged with some of the exhibitors, and that's really, really good to get them involved.
My goodness, it's going to be fantastic. 170 exhibitors, that busy conference program. You've got your awards dinner smack bang in the middle of that as well. Who's your speaker this year?
Well, we've got no other than Rory Bremner, who's the great impressionist. And I thought, well, perfect timing for someone who, well, if they know who Rory Bremner is, as a lot of satire, and it's going to be really interesting, let's say, to hear from him at the dinner. So we'll probably have, I think it's about between 500 and 600 people attending the dinner.
Oh, terrific.
7 awards, and Rory's in there to entertain us. So I'll be speaking to Rory, I think it's tomorrow, to give him this sort of final brief, and we'll make sure that we're going to entertain the crowd on the evening as well.
Oh, it'll be fantastic, fantastic. For the people who corral all of this and lead all of this, what is the ambition that someone comes along to Subsea Expo, takes advantage of the exhibitions, attends some conference programs? What do you want them to leave Subsea Expo feeling? What's the ambition?
That's a great thing. I think many people come for many different things. Some folk come along and they make some great connections, and they say, that was great, I've got a huge amount of follow-up. which is great because you can come and do business, and that's a really good place to come and do business. But you can come along there and you can learn a lot by going through some of these conference sessions and tuning into that. But if someone comes to an event, would like to come away with business opportunities, but also helping them understand where and what they're going to do with their business, or how they're going to shape the business activity that they have, because that's part of what they're doing, understanding what the markets are doing, understand where industry is going. And it's a great chance to meet lots and lots of different people there and come away with lots of great contacts. So a place to do business and a place to really understand what the future holds for us, because it is, as I say, a confusing time, so dynamic at the moment.
Fantastic. We're going to bring this little session to a close. Just if you could, maybe both of you could feed into this. What are the plans? We heard about Global Underwater Hub's current setup. We know that the Expo's coming next week. What are your plans? Anything that you can share with us that are coming perhaps throughout the rest of this year, maybe into next? What's the next few steps? You've grown massively. What are the next few plans for Global Underwater Hub?
Well, let me start, and then I'll pass on to Steve, because something Steve's working on hard at the moment. We've two areas that we really see growth for the subsea sector. Oil and gas is still a massive part, decommissioning, transition, etc., and globally. And that is still going to remain a huge part of our activity, and there's no doubt about that. But if we look at the new areas, we've talked about defence. Defence is an area that we're looking at because of the geopolitical situation, what's going on, and that's growing. So the technologies that are involved there, and we're developing that side more so in the southern sector because of the Navy bases, etc. But the other area, particularly in offshore energy, is in wind. Fixed wind, but now floating offshore wind. Floating offshore wind is where we see the biggest opportunity for the subsea side, and that's where we will focus. And I'm sure you'll hear much more in the coming weeks and months about what the scale of that is, and Steve's been doing a lot of work on that. We ran a program last year on subsea cables, and that's now taken huge leaps and bounds forward. And we've got a subsea cables forum, which is looking at how do we raise the quality and standards of cables, because there was huge amounts of failures and they were becoming uninsurable. So there's a program now taking shape, and that's really moving forward. The next one is just about to start in the underwater space, is the mooring and anchoring systems, and that's a big opportunity. And maybe Steve, you could expand a little bit on that just to give us an insight.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing what Neil said, we obviously see the underwater elements as being the key parts, the key interesting parts. So building on cables, looking at the mooring and anchoring systems, and I think across wind in general, it's the sheer size and scale of components that are going to be required here. So what we're looking to focus on with an event that we have in a couple of weeks' time in Newcastle on the 6th of March, we're focusing on mooring and anchoring systems, and we've got a really good lineup across that full life cycle of developers, surveyors, designers, manufacturers, installers. And then once it's in the water, there's that full life of field requirement as well in terms of inspection, repair, and things like that as well. So we're really looking to bring industry together essentially, and look to have the conversations that's helping to really push the supply chain to the forefront of what can be done for mooring and anchoring systems, and hopefully set a little bit best practice and benchmarking that allows us to be globally competitive, as well as all the projects that we've got off our own shores as well. So yeah, building on cables, our second stream will be mooring and anchoring systems that begins next month.
Very good, very good. Lots going on. You're not standing still for too long. We know that. You're always moving, always pushing forward. Thanks for taking half an hour out of your afternoons, particularly in the lead up to a busy show, Subsea Expo next week. We wish you all the best with your plans, and we might check in with you. Maybe we won't leave it for a year this time. We'd maybe check in with you a wee bit sooner. Best of luck with all that you're doing with your expansion and all of your plans. Good luck for next week, Subsea Expo. I hope it goes super well for you, and I'm hoping to bump into you at some point when I'm there next week. Thank you so much to Neil and Steve. Thanks, it's been brilliant. See you soon.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, you heard it there first. Lots of insight on what's happening at Subsea Expo and for the plans with Global Underwater Hub. That is the end of this short show. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for some of your interaction and spending some time with us. Just before we leave, just a reminder: the guys at OGV have asked me to drop in a little reminder. They're going to be at AOG in Perth. They've got a big pavilion there. they're looking forward to seeing you there. If you are heading over, I've got a little graphic for you here that I can show you, if I can pull this up. If you're heading over to AOG in March, they would be absolutely delighted if you joined them on Tuesday, the 12th of March. I think that's the day before the show, at a golf networking day out at Joondalup Country Club, which is absolutely fantastic. If that interests you in any way, all you do is just simply get in touch with either Dan Highland or Andy Mackay. You can see their email addresses down below there. Drop them an email, or simply call that number 01224 084 114 to secure your place at a fantastic. If you've ever been to an OGV Energy golf do, you know that they're fantastic, and this one's going to be extra special. So that's just a wee heads up to let you know that that's happening. If I can put that away, yeah, I'll put that away, and I'll put this over here. There we go. I'm back. Thank you so much for joining us today. We always love doing these. We're going to be back on the 29th of this month to do a much more expanded subsea show. We're going to be meeting lots of companies that are active in the sector, and we're going to be getting their reflections on Subsea Expo. So we're just going to keep this subsea ball rolling. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and we will catch you next time. And thank you to our guests. See you later. Bye-bye. Thank you.